individuals in El Salvador, from what I've seen, are not going around spending Bitcoin. Businesses are not accepting it. McDonald's, Starbucks, large retailers are, but individual businesses weren't accepting it. Now, they were mandated by law to do it, but they're not accepting it. Individuals are not using Bitcoin or
Mm-hmm.
Lightning as cash in El Salvador primarily. So that's a great question. What happens?
Hmm.
I don't know the answer. And I don't think the El Salvadorian government is in a particular rush to find a solution to the problem, simply because I don't think it's widespread enough that they're putting out statements that say, hey,
Yeah.
if your money's lost for buying a tortilla, we'll take care of it. No one's going around spending Bitcoin on tortillas.
I live unbanked off of cryptocurrency, and I use Bitrefill extensively because it lets me pay with crypto at places that don't yet accept it directly. This one service, more than any other, helps me live on crypto, pay your prepaid phone bill, or buy gift cards to thousands of major retailers around the world, all with cryptocurrency, including for exact amounts so you don't have to buy more gift credit than you need for a specific purchase. You can use Bitrefill without an account, but if you get an account, you can earn rewards points, which translate to savings, and you can also hold a balance denominated in dollars or euros to protect yourself against market crashes. Go to bitrefill.com, click Create Account, and enter the referral code DCN, or follow the link in the description. Let's get on with this. So, hey everyone, I have the wonderful pleasure of speaking once again, although you guys didn't see the first time, speaking with the one and only awesome Marc Falzon. How's it going, man?
Great to see you again and everyone else for the first time.
Yeah, so I would have had something for you guys months ago, but
Mhm.
I recorded an interview, and for some reason the audio did not transcribe in a very freak accent. I've not been able to kind of replicate. All the audio levels were bouncing and everything, but anyway, just covering my ass real quick. But the good thing is it seems to be an evergreen story of the adoption of Bitcoin in El Salvador.
Mhm.
And you were there, and it seems like I kind of was worried that the story would fade away in the meantime, or that
Mhm.
situations would change. So it's like, yeah, back then it was like this, but now it's different. And it seems like, first off, the Latin American Bitcoin conference is either ongoing or, you know, recently passed, depending on when you're listening to this. But also the issues with the government provided services seem to still be persisting. So why don't you just tell us real quick, in a story I'm sure you've repeated far too many times, but what is your involvement with Bitcoin in El Salvador? How did you get roped into it? When did you go, and what happened?
Well, I originally went down to the Bitcoin beach, which is in El
Mm-hmm.
Zonte. And this was before Bitcoin became the national currency of El Salvador. When I went down there, I was just going to do a fairly simple, straightforward video of using cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, showing that, hey, this is really cool. People are using it. There's adoption, which is
Mm-hmm.
what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
And I made my beach video, happy with that, and I left the country. And I remember thinking to myself, hey, they're about to make this a national currency. Why am I not there now? So I booked a flight and I went right back to El Salvador. And I was there for the mandate coming into effect, where everyone is, all businesses, I should say, are
Mm-hmm.
required to accept Bitcoin as a currency. Again, I thought it would be a fairly straightforward 10-minute video for my channel, just kind of celebrating cryptocurrency. As I found out, and as
Mm-hmm.
many people have since found out, it turns out that the story of Bitcoin in El Salvador is significantly more complicated and nuanced than I think anyone was really expecting.
Yeah. So you go there first in the Bitcoin beach, and from just memory on the video, you go around, try to spend some stuff. It's a little kind of tricky because a lot of this is done through this specific app for this very small region, and not all Lightning wallets can support, or it's a difficulty of sending on-chain Bitcoin or Lightning to these things. It's just a little complicated, but it's just like, okay, whatever, they got their thing going. So you come back, and at that point, every single business is mandated to now accept Bitcoin payments. So first off, as far as the mandate's concerned, is it mandated that they accept Bitcoin just as long as they can say they took Bitcoin, or do they have to do it through a specific way?
So the way that the law works, as far as I
Mm-hmm.
understand it, is businesses there that are technologically capable of
Mm-hmm.
accepting Bitcoin must do so if a customer comes in and wishes to pay with Bitcoin. Now, the wallet is not mandated. So individuals and businesses can use whatever wallet they wish.
Mm-hmm.
However, and here's where things get nuanced, the government has made their own wallet called Chivo. And the government wallet is notoriously, let's just say, um, bad.
Yeah.
It loses payments, it times out. I sent a payment to myself on a live stream through the Chivo app on September 9th, I believe. It's November 18th now, and that payment still hasn't come to me.
Mm-hmm.
So the issue is, although business owners in El Salvador can choose to use any wallet they want, they can't choose to reject individuals who wish to use the wallets they want. So if someone comes in with a Chivo wallet wanting to pay, I, as a business owner, must accept it.
Hmm. And you don't need to have a Chivo wallet to accept from a Chivo customer, right?
Right. You don't need to have any specific wallet. Um, you can use whatever wallet you want.
Well, then that comes to the next question, because you're saying about a payment that you sent through the Chivo wallet did not make it to its end destination. So, and I mean, I'm not sure if you know the answer to this question, but I'll go anyways. What happens if someone says, I'm going to pay with Chivo? And they, all right, and they open up there, let's just pick Breeze, right? Some like Lightning wallet. And then the Chivo sends, but it never gets to the Breeze. So on the Chivo end, it says it went through, but on the other end, it doesn't say it went through. What happens there? Is the customer just kind of like shit out of luck? Does the business have to relinquish the goods because they paid with the according to the app it worked and therefore, or is there a huge gray area, or just what have you seen in those situations?
That's an excellent question. And the reality is that it's not a question that has much urgency.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is because individuals in El Salvador, from what I've seen, are not going around spending Bitcoin. Businesses are not accepting it. McDonald's, Starbucks, large retailers are, but individual businesses weren't accepting it. Now, they were mandated by law to do it,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not accepting it. Individuals are not using Bitcoin or
Mm-hmm.
Lightning as cash in El Salvador primarily. So that's a great question. What happens?
Hmm.
I don't know the answer. And I don't think the El Salvadorian government is in a particular rush to find a solution to the problem, simply because I don't think it's widespread enough that they're putting out statements that say, hey,
Yeah.
if your money's lost for buying a tortilla, we'll take care of it. No one's going around spending Bitcoin on tortillas or
Yeah.
pupusas, probably better
Of course.
food item to choose.
So if you go to let's just say you're in there for a conference, as there is one going on, and you just say,
Mhm.
hey, this is magical. I get to spend digital money that no one can control. I get to spend it anywhere. And you just like go down off the beaten path, and there's this little pupusa stand. And you're just there like, hey, I'd like this. I want to pay in Bitcoin. And then probably what's going to happen, vendor makes something up like, oh, yeah, I don't know. The phone's just not working. Sorry. Do you have like dollars? That's probably the way it's going to turn out in like 90% of in the circumstances. Is that a feeling you'd get?
For my time there, I wasn't able to find any smaller business that was willing to accept cryptocurrency.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I met with these two guys who have a YouTube channel, and they're Brazilian and they're passionate
Mm-hmm.
about Bitcoin. Really great guys. I think their channel is called B Trees. In any event, um, they told me why they were there to do a documentary, sort of like I was doing about Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
They were in San Benito, and they were only able to find one business in the entire sub city that
Mm-hmm.
accepted Bitcoin. It was a hotel. Um, no one accepted it again, except for Starbucks, McDonald's, like the big box retailers. So pupusa stands, things like that, they're not going to be accepting Bitcoin, at least not during the time I was there. Now that could change, of
Of
course.
course. What would the response be? So it's not just, is it, no, we do not accept this? Or is it, oh, yeah, well, not yet? Or is it like a conditional thing? Is it a, well, we should, but it's just not working today? Just kind of gauge like where people are at with this because
Mm,
it's not like, I mean, it could be a situation where they practically don't take it, but they're worried about there's some worry about getting in trouble for not taking it. So they're just saying, "Oh yeah, sorry, right now, come back when it's working," kind of thing. Or if it's just like, "Nah, we're not dealing with that at all."
that's a great question. I intend to go back to El Salvador to find out how things have changed
Mm-hmm.
since I've left the country. I know that when I was there, it was so new that many of the people who I asked if they accept Bitcoin simply didn't know that they were required to take it at all. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't even a question of like, well, no, why?
Yeah.
For example, one woman who's fluent English, she went to undergraduate and I believe graduate school in America, and she opened up a kind of luxury health food store in San Salvador. And I asked her what she thinks about having to accept Bitcoin at her business, and she said, "What are you talking about? I don't have to accept Bitcoin. Is that what are you talking about?" She had no idea that that day the law had been passed, and she qualified for being technically capable of accepting it, therefore mandated to take it.
Just never got the memo, I guess.
Never got the memo.
Yeah, so it's funny because the law basically, which has been belabored many times, says everyone has to take it. If you owe debts in USD or you can pay them in Bitcoin now. And basically that's it, except for the government will provide a service for you to convert Bitcoin to USD if you do not want to keep it. And that's
Mhm.
kind of where the Chivo wallet comes in. The Chivo app is merchant point of sale slash actual like user wallet, custodial wallet. And obviously on the merchant side it makes sense because the law promised they have to provide this. But then you see a lot of people using these things. Like the average person, millions of downloads. In fact, I've seen it hyped all over the place that more people have Bitcoin wallets than bank accounts in El Salvador and things
Mhm.
like that. So how did they get millions of people to download this wallet in this country? What is
Well,
not
before I
is
answer
not
that,
required. Yes, okay.
right. Before I answer that, you used a keyword that
The
the
C
president
word.
of
Nah,
the
the
president of El Salvador would not use, and
mm-hmm.
that word was download.
Mm-hmm.
So that's correct. As far as we know, there's been millions of downloads of the Chivo app. That phrasing is important because the way that Bitcoin Magazine and the president of El Salvador has phrased it is they said users, which
Mm-hmm.
implies that people are actively using the app in an intended way. Now, the reason that there's so many downloads is because
Mm-hmm.
individuals in the country are able to get access to $30 worth of free Bitcoin when they
Mm-hmm.
download the app. Now, what you'll see, and I don't think there's any debate around this, even in the Bitcoin
Mm-hmm.
community, is that the individuals that are getting access are immediately getting the money out in the form of USD. And
Mm-hmm.
once it's out, it's out.
That's it. Yeah.
So yeah, I think the idea is that uh, the exposure to Bitcoin, maybe over time, they'll try it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they'll save more money in Bitcoin. Um, maybe they'll change their mind. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think that's all great. I think giving exposure to Bitcoin is a very positive thing, even if they don't want to use it right then. But again, my worry is how we're talking about this. We're calling downloads users. We're making it seem like people are using Bitcoin in El Salvador, the individuals in the country, which really isn't maybe completely truthful.
So I basically, how do you get USD out of it, out of the wallet? What's the process for that? So let's just say you, as a Salvadoreño who just wants his free money, he says, okay, I'm going to go, I'm going to buy, I'm going to download this wallet. And that's step one. What's step two? What's step three?
Step two is you need to send the Bitcoin to other Chivo wallets before you can take it out as cash. The reason for that is they don't want people to just take the Bitcoin out. They want people to use the Bitcoin and experience it. So if you go on Twitter and you do speak Spanish, I don't. But if you
Yeah.
look at some of the tweets, you'll see that there's training manuals and guides on how to get that barrier that prevents you from getting the cash away. So it'll tell you, yeah, do this, do this, do that, and then you can unlock the money. And most people, step three is to go to an ATM, a Chivo ATM, and then it outputs the cash.
So they basically have merchant point of sale apps for merchants to take it, and it gets converted to USD at the other end. Then you can download a mobile wallet, which is like a mini bank store where you can send back and forth. It's a custodial wallet, but it basically works like a wallet. You can send back and forth. And then there's ATMs where you can withdraw USD. You could also buy Bitcoin through the ATMs, right? It's not just outgoing.
That's correct.
Okay. It's probably not used. I'm guessing it's not used as much as the other function. But do these ATMs, are they, I know they're Chivo branded, but are they just Bitcoin ATMs or are they Chivo ATMs? As in, if I run around, I'm like, okay, this is so, and I've done this before, right? Because I live off of crypto. I don't have a bank account. And when I spoke in Madrid in 2019, like I flew into Madrid, found my way to a ATM, shout out to Shitcoins Club, and then sent some crypto into the ATM and got euros out, and I used that during my stay there because I didn't know other places I could actually spend it. But like I've done this before. So if I wanted to do this in San Salvador, I go there and I'm like, I got some Bitcoin, I know, like, or whatever I have, I swap it over for Bitcoin so I have something they'll use. I go to a Chivo ATM and I send Bitcoin from, let's just say Blue Wallet, just some other wallet. I send it into the ATM. Does that work, or do I need to put it into a Chivo app first and only do it through the Chivo app to get it out?
There's been some discussion on that, some disagreement for whatever reason. So I went to test it myself. And what I found is that you can take Bitcoin out of the Chivo ATMs with any app. You can do it with, the Moon Wallet, anything. It's not specific to Chivo. The other thing is, there's no fees. So let's say that you send $10 worth of Bitcoin to the Chivo ATM. There's going to be a fee to send the Bitcoin, of course. So maybe you'll lose 25 cents, right? So $9.75. You'll actually get your full $10 out of the ATM.
So it deducts your Bitcoin transaction fee that you send? Like it gives you that on top?
Yes.
Huh. Very interesting. I wonder how it would know that, because the way like the blockchain works is if I send you $10 worth of Bitcoin, you get that, and the fee isn't like necessarily known to the person who sends it unless they look into the transaction. They just get the transaction. And so it's kind of interesting how they, so for example, this is a funny thing. Like, you can choose your own fee with Bitcoin. It doesn't always work out, but
I see what you're saying. Let
yeah.
me interject. So what I'm
Yes.
referring to is with the Chivo apps, there's no fees at all. With
Yeah.
ATMs, with anything.
Okay.
If you're going to use your Mun wallet, then you'll send $10 worth and you'll
Mm-hmm.
get $10 out.
Yeah. Yeah. So it seems like a lot of consternation has been over um, the usability of this Chivo wallet. And
Mhm.
the reason why, like, so crypto is a complicated technology. And today, I'm sure, I mean, I've used Dash a lot, I've used Bitcoin Cash a lot, I've used a bunch of things that it works pretty well, but it's still like, it's kind of like still like driving stick, where you have to,
Mhm.
you kind of see the mechanics of it too much for, it's not just a push button thing. You have to crank a key, you got to do this, and, grind the gears, and you kind of see some of that stuff still. Bitcoin's even more complicated because obviously the fees and transaction times are higher. And so sometimes it's confusing. Why didn't it go through? Why does it cost this much? But also there's a bunch of different address formats now. And then when you add Lightning, which is it's a whole different, it's not like a whole different currency kind of. It's kind of worse because, or worse, it's kind of more extreme because it does not work like any other cryptocurrency in terms of like
Mhm.
funding channels and stuff like that. So I understand that if you're going to say, hey, everyone use Bitcoin, it's by default going to be a disaster. And you have to provide something that's a hand holder, which is what the app is, right? You're trying to
Mhm.
hold their hands, just send and receive, there you go. And so I kind of understand a little bit that like stuff doesn't always work. The problem is all these like ghost payments. It's
Mhm.
like it eats your, I mean, I'm sure you remember the days of like the old school vending machines. Sometimes they would just like eat your money and you're like, where did
Yeah.
it go? And just, sorry, I just lost the money. And so Chivo seems to eat people's payments once in a while.
Mhm.
Anecdotally, how common do you think this has been? I mean, obviously, there's no way for you to know, any of us to really know, except for Chivo maybe. But like, what do you think it is? Is it like a 1 out of 10 kind of a thing? Is it like a 5 out of 10? Is it like a 1 out of 100? Like, how common does it seem to be that something goes wrong in a Chivo payment, just from what you've been able to, you know, tell?
uh, with my testing, I
Mm-hmm.
found that the Chivo app failed significantly more than it worked. However,
Mm.
I only had one transaction where the payment was eaten. Most of the payments would simply time out, lag
Mm-hmm.
out, give me a
Yeah.
fail or an error. So I'd say maybe out of 30 attempts total, maybe one payment was just into the ether. So I couldn't tell you how common it is with others, but um, one of the tweets that I saw that was interesting is someone tweeted me their support
Mm-hmm.
ticket from Chivo, and it was in the 80,000 range because it will, every ticket has a number. So
Yeah.
at that point, it was a couple of weeks in, it had 80,000 support tickets. So, who knows why or what that is, what those people are struggling with. But
Mm-hmm.
the Chivo app definitely has, as you mentioned, technical shortcomings.
Yeah. And this kind of, I mean, I sort of, I wouldn't say, if you're forcing everyone to use something or if the government's promising something and it's a complete disaster, I
Hmm.
mean, I remember the healthcare website that was unveiled in the US not too long ago was a giant disaster as well. I understand
Hmm.
that. The thing that's a little bit concerning, I would say, is the way the app seems to work in regards to the actual underlying technology. Because if I send you Bitcoin on chain, and I mean,
Hmm.
you've done this enough times, you see how it works, it shows up right away. You see it right away. Or even if your app doesn't recognize it, you can look it up on a block explorer and it's like, there it went. It's just unconfirmed. It's,
Hmm.
whatever. Or maybe it just, if I don't get a transaction ID, it doesn't, like, it did not send. Lightning is, I haven't had in all my using of Lightning, I have not had a time when it went through and the other person didn't recognize it. What I have had is lots of failed payments. But in that
Hmm.
case, it just goes, it tries once, doesn't work. It tries. Like sometimes you have like 20, 30 seconds of it trying to find a route and then it doesn't work. Or sometimes
Hmm.
it goes one, two, and it goes through. Sometimes one, two, and it doesn't go through. But it just doesn't go through. It tells you it doesn't
Hmm.
go through. once it goes through, because it's not like a public blockchain like the underlying Bitcoin, it's a little harder to trace. But in both cases, you should be able to see where it went. This whole ghost payment thing, it's it doesn't make sense from a technological standpoint.
Mhm.
And like if you use a custodial service, you deposit to Coinbase, and they say, "Well, I haven't got your thing yet." You can show on the blockchain it went into their hot wallet. They have like all their money in cold storage, and then they have a certain amount in a hot wallet that's online, and everything goes in there. And you can see, look, it went in there, and then they can connect the dots. But it seems like with Chivo, they're just like eating money, like it just goes away. And I don't know, what do you think? I mean, not from a, like, a technical perspective, but just what do you think about that? Like, what do you think they're actually using? Do you think they're actually using this stuff, or do you think there's something a little fishy going on?
Okay, well, I'll tell you an experience, an
Yeah.
anecdote, and then I'll tell you what I think.
Mm-hmm.
The anecdote first. So I remember when I had my first payment that lagged out. In the first hour, I was trying to figure out what happened. Why didn't the payment go through? It says pending. With the normal wallet app, you'd be able to click the payment you made, and it will expand and show you the details.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, you could go onto a block explorer and things of that nature. But what I found with the user interface of Chivo is when you send a payment and you click the payment to get the details, there's no detail. Not only can you not see any of the technical back end of where that payment's going, but it won't even show you the address you've sent it to. There's just no
Mm-hmm.
information. It just shows the number that you sent and an arrow to indicate that you're sending it out, and then a clock to indicate that it's pending. There's no additional information that you can get access to whatsoever. The way that I would imagine that this is working is if it's almost like I would imagine like a PayPal account where
Mm-hmm.
you have an account, and in that account, the user is not actually holding any Bitcoin. They're holding nothing. There's nothing in there. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
number associated with the user of how much Bitcoin that user is theoretically entitled to. So there could be a queue where when a user makes a request to send money in or out, it waits until the queue is free, and then it handles their transaction and then
Mm-hmm.
sends it off where it needs to go. So if that is how it works, and one of those, let's say one of the items in the queue was lost, I have no idea how technically that would work. But my point is, it doesn't seem that there's a one-to-one connection between the Bitcoin itself and a user's app. Sort of like PayPal, right? If you have a PayPal account,
Mm-hmm.
it's not as if PayPal opens up a bank account and puts dollars into Marc Falzon's PayPal account.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
So
They just
that's
say you have
how I'd
stuff.
imagine this would work too.
Yeah. And so the thing about, I'm eager to sort of play around with this a little bit on my own, because the way crypto, so if you connect your Lightning node to Chivo somehow, you should be able to find whichever node they're using. I'm guessing they have like one node with channels connected to other people. And so every time anyone pays, like if I pay you, or if I pay you, a Chivo user, or I pay
Mhm.
someone else, a Chivo user, it's going to the exact same spot through the exact same channel, maybe even, right? It's probably
Mhm.
like they just get all the money into one spot, and then they have another database that says who owns what. That's probably my guess. And as far as the blockchain, like the on chain stuff, that's a lot easier to figure out because that is actually public. You could just, if I send to a Chivo user, I can see the address on the blockchain, and it's either going to be some giant pot of money, or it's going
Mhm.
to probably have connections to a giant pot of money somewhere. And
Mhm.
it'd be interesting to see how much is in the Chivo ecosystem versus how
Mhm.
much is credited to people who are in the Chivo ecosystem. Because there's a
Mhm.
possibility that we're talking fractional reserve Bitcoin, either intentionally or unintentionally. It could just be someone sending, someone sends money and they, oh yeah, it said it went through, but they didn't get it yet, and then they, too many people withdrew and they just hadn't synced up yet. It could be something like that.
Uh, yeah.
You know, it could just be also that there literally is a fraction, like a fractional reserve, like a fraction of the amount of total Bitcoin that's in the system is actually kept there. So let's
Yeah.
just say there's 2/3. Let's just say there's 1,000. I don't know how much that is. Let's say like 1,000 Bitcoin are in the system, which is highball, right? Let's just say, what if it's actually 300 Bitcoin that's in there at any one time, and they're just no people aren't withdrawing right away, or like they do failed payments while they wait for the price to go down so they could buy the dip and then they could put it back in and make good on the creditors and close the support tickets. This is my little Alex Jones tinfoil hat moment, but it's the thing is we don't actually know that that's not happening with a lot of systems. Even centralized exchanges, we know it's not because we see how much money goes in and out on the blockchain. But this is a little bit strangely opaque.
Yeah, that's very true. And um, I'm not a citizen of El Salvador, but if America had a system like this, I would certainly, and my taxes were paying for it, I'd certainly want to know how it works. I'd certainly hope that it was transparent.
Yeah. So now we get to like the bigger picture of this whole thing, which
Mm.
is it seems like one guy, Mr. Bukele, decided to he met with some Bitcoin people. He got sold and he says, I'm gonna do this thing. He pushes this law through and it happens. And I'm sure I've seen enough of his tweets, enough of his appearances, enough of everything. He's not a stupid guy. He's a very intelligent and educated man. And
Mhm.
he's up on the lingo of everything and not in like a you can tell when people are cringy about things that they are pandering. Not saying he's
Mhm.
not pandering, but he seems to know what's going on.
Mhm.
What is his aim in this whole thing? This is a speculation thing because does he just want everyone to just be using Bitcoin and it just better off for the whole country? Because it seems like there's a lot of posturing of this is going one way, and then
Mhm.
on under the surface, it seems like there's a lot of potentially gross incompetence or potentially something else. What do you speculate is going on? Like, why is this all happening to begin with?
Well, I think that Nayib Bukele in El Salvador, any country, and
Mm-hmm.
any leader has a vested interest in raising the economic situation of their country.
Mm.
And I think that their country primarily, their economy is largely based on remittances, people working overseas, and what is a way that you can bring a lot of money into the country to enrich yourself and your party, but also individuals in the country.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe, and again, this is speculation, that this is Bitcoin is an excellent way to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is you allow people to buy permanent residence. I think the cost is
Mm-hmm.
3 Bitcoin. You
Wow.
allow people in the crypto space to be able to spend their crypto
Mm-hmm.
uh, in what amounts to a tax haven,
Mm-hmm.
and you attract these people down because every merchant accepts your Bitcoin. So of course you're going to come down here. Of course you're going to become a permanent resident. Of course you're going to use your Bitcoin, and the citizens have no use largely. And I should be careful with my language. They have use for Bitcoin, but let's say the interest of Bitcoin for individuals is fairly low. And for
Yeah.
businesses, the same thing. There's almost no interest from a business standpoint, even from people, a lot of people who love crypto. When you manage
Mm-hmm.
your day-to-day business, if you have employees, if you have a cafe, that's pretty difficult. How do you pay your employees? So for most people, you simply convert your Bitcoin right into US dollars, and then the central government gets the Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an excellent way to effectively farm uh, Bitcoin off your citizens
Mm-hmm.
in a way that is, let's say, if you're optimistic, beneficial to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
The merchant doesn't lose out on anything accepting Bitcoin and
Yeah.
converting it into dollars,
Gets more
and the
business.
central government gets
Mm-hmm.
gets their Bitcoin, and obviously lures people like me and other crypto enthusiasts down into
Mm-hmm.
El Salvador. So I think on its face, it's not an unreasonable um, deal for anyone involved. But of course, the devil is in the details. And do the ends justify the means? Does stripping freedom away from people
Hmm.
justify? These are big questions that I can't answer. But that's why I think they're doing it. If I were to guess.
Yeah. So it's like a way of drawing in foreign investment and a way for the government to draw in Bitcoin.
Hmm.
I had thought about,
That's what I think.
yeah, I had posited the first of the two. It's clearly a thing to, I mean, and people even are roasting him under his tweet, Bukele, his tweets, because he's got a good Twitter game. I'm not going to lie about that. But they're
Hmm.
roasting him. He says, dude, why are you tweeting in English like in Spanish? They say, dude, why are you tweeting in English all the time? Aren't you the president of a Spanish
Yeah.
speaking people? And more particularly, it's the crypto stuff, the Bitcoin stuff is all English, and
Yep.
I mean, I think it should be pretty transparent that the entire idea of doing this was primarily to get things like the Latin American Bitcoin conference, which is taking place in his country, and I do not believe it was there in previous years, is to drive in foreign interest, foreign investment, things like that.
Hmm.
Now, as far as I hadn't considered the second option that you mentioned, but it does make sense now that you outline it, which is to acquire more Bitcoin because they can buy Bitcoin at any time, right?
Hmm.
One thing, it's a little, I mean, it's a little, I would say sad. I guess it's sad because when you're the lines outside the ATMs, oh, look, everyone's using this. It's people dumping their Bitcoin for USD.
Yes.
And then there's a lot of like tweets and stuff about like, oh, look, they're up 20% since he's making this country rich, but then there's big dumps too because the markets, it goes up and down. Someone who doesn't have a lot of money is probably going to take the money and then dump it whenever they can,
Yeah.
sometimes with profit, a lot of times not. And so the government, let's just say, takes $50 from you in taxes,
Hmm.
gives it to you in Bitcoin. It goes to 56. You're in line for the ATM. It's down to 40 by the time you're there. You sell it back to the government, and they kind of keep the difference a little bit. So, I mean, I hope a lot of people ended up getting a profit off of that little first
Hmm.
donation or that first payment, but it might be that a lot of people just like lost extra money. Now we're talking about like essentially, we're talking about the second of those things is the government is speculating on Bitcoin. That
Hmm.
they're speculating that if we put all our money or a big chunk of our money in this, at taxpayer expense, of course,
Hmm.
that it will go up in value.
Hmm.
And basically, there's two possible outcomes after this. The first one is that they time it correctly, where like they don't sell anymore, they buy this dip too, and then maybe next month, January or something, the peak bull market it crests over 100,000, like 130 USD, let's just say per Bitcoin. That seems reasonable, which is kind of crazy to we're saying that seems reasonable based on a few years ago,
Exactly.
but so it does really well, and then they're like yes, and then they dump it all. Now they've made a big lot of money that government's great at losing and making them poor again, but that's a different story. But they made a lot of money. On the other
Hmm.
hand, what happens if it goes there and then they're like, well, what's going to a million now? Then they buy a bunch. Then the bear market comes and it starts settling down. And then let's just say bear market low is something like 30 to 40 grand, something like,
Hmm.
let's just make it throw some number out there. And now the El Salvadorian government is significantly in the hole for this,
Hmm.
and then it could be terrible for people. I mean, do you think that either of those things is a likely outcome, and which one do you think would be a more likely outcome?
It's an excellent question.
Hmm.
I couldn't say one way or the other what they intend to do with
Mm-hmm.
the Bitcoin that they're amassing. I don't know if there's any indication that Naib has said that they'll sell. It seems like they're in
Mm-hmm.
an acquisition period here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what happens if they do sell?
Mm-hmm.
If they make a profit, does that get distributed? to
Hmm.
the people of the country, or is that held? Part of the other problem is there's not clarity and transparency as to how much Bitcoin they actually have. And if they sell, what happens to that money? Does that just is that
Hmm.
put in a bank account that uh, fact checkers can check, or is that invisible just like the Bitcoin? So there's a lot of questions
Hmm.
in regards to what they'll do with the Bitcoin and the transparency of it all. That's invisible.
Yeah. Do you think
So
there's a chance, and this goes to a little, more tinfoil, but that Bukele himself was just, young and hip and just bought into the idea of Bitcoin. He has a bunch, and he's like, all right, I'm going to look like the hero for bringing investment to my country, but more importantly, I'll pump my own Bitcoin stash, because if you say a whole country's accepting it, if you say millions of users, say all this stuff, the value, my personal investment's going to go up. Is that a little too far?
I wouldn't know, to be
Yeah.
honest. From what it seems like to me, this is a way to farm resources from individuals in their country to a
Mm-hmm.
centralized, effectively one party system. And crypto is the tool to do that. They wouldn't have been able to do this with USD, with
Mm-hmm.
yen, with pesos. So they are, in a way, very clever to take a resource that they have, which is the labor of their people, and to find a way to unlock new potential of it. So I'm sure that on an individual level, Nayib Bukele will profit, uh, but I think that this is a bigger picture, which is over the
Mm-hmm.
next 100 years, how do you position El Salvador as a country with vast financial resources
Mm-hmm.
and providing a tax haven by forcing merchants to accept it is certainly a way to do that, at least from my perspective.
Now, I remember last time we chatted, a lot of this stuff, especially the negative parts, were a little bit more fresh, but then
Mhm.
you still wrapped up with a positive outlook on what this could mean for the country, the region, and crypto as a whole. So, what do you think? Do you think this is, while this may or may not be a good thing itself, do you think this ends up as a positive?
I did end positively last
Mm-hmm.
time. And I think overall, for individuals in the country, this experiment will expose people to crypto who normally would not have been exposed. And if any of those individuals transfer some of that Bitcoin off of Chivo onto a safe wallet and
Mm-hmm.
hold that Bitcoin $30, $5, even $1, I think that's positive in the long run. So I
Mm-hmm.
still do feel let's say, overall optimistic about Bitcoin in El Salvador. But let me tell you this. I recently had a comment that was left on one of my recent videos, and I thought it was really revealing of how
Mm-hmm.
people feel in El Salvador about Bitcoin. So if it's okay, I'll read you his comment. This
Yeah.
guy, his name is Oscar, and he follows my channel, my Twitter. I actually met him in El Salvador. He recognized me at the Bitcoin protests and approached me. Um, but again, one of the criticisms of people there who are against Bitcoin is they paint them as people who don't understand Bitcoin. They don't
Mm.
like or understand the technology. That's not accurate. That may be accurate in regards to some people, but
Mm-hmm.
by and large, people there are sophisticated. Just because people in the West have more money doesn't make doesn't make us more intelligent.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's
you
for
know,
damn sure.
yeah, we forget that. So
Mm-hmm.
listen to this comment. He says,
Mm-hmm.
for people watching outside El Salvador, I'm a Salvadorian invested in Bitcoin and other cryptos. These people are not protesting Bitcoin itself, but governmental policies that has put $300 million on preparing BTC infrastructure, like creating the Chivo wallet, ATMs, BTC mining, building Chivo wallet offices, etc. When there are no funds for schools and hospitals, small business owners have come out and said that BTC transactions are less than 1% of the total they receive. So the government has put out $300 million for something that Salvadorians don't even use, a total waste of money. The 2022 budget proposes public universities, schools, and hospitals were allocated less funding this year from previous years. And that funding, that new funding that they're taking away from these institutions will be allocated to BTC infrastructure that, as he said, accounts for less than 1% of what people use. So that's the real issue Salvadorians are protesting against. So, whether you believe that government should be giving money to education or however you feel, you can understand that the resources being used to fuel this technology are so vast, and could they be used for places that will help people more immediately? Hospitals, for example, infrastructure, technology, education. Will investing in that be more beneficial to the country versus a bet on Bitcoin, which really, if we're going to be kind of tinfoil hat here, really only benefits a single political party that's maintained a pretty hostile grip of the country.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's true. And one thing, as of course the great French economist Frederic Bastiat is fond of having said, he mentions the seen versus what is not seen. You see that this happens, but you don't see the opportunity cost, for example. And so when you have money going one way, you don't see how it could have been allocated a different way. And one thing I think is, I mean, 300 million for crypto infrastructure is crazy. And then at the same time, I'm presented with the opposite side of things, or the other side of things. Not very far away in Venezuela, you have major supermarket chains and Burger King and Starbucks and a whole bunch of these other places that all take crypto. And they, for example, and if you look at the transaction things, like it's like Bitcoin is number one half the time, Dash is number one the second half of the time, because a lot of people, poured a lot of resources into trying to make sure you had a good adoption presence there for sure. But it's still nonetheless, and if you look at the transaction numbers, they're pretty small. It's like, I don't know, officially in this payment processor, Crypto Buyer, which is with my friend Jorge, who unfortunately passed away in the last year. But it's relatively small, like 6-7 a day or something, and that's the way anything new starts out, right? 6-7 people a day buying stuff. But it didn't cost 300 million. It didn't cost anyone 300 million. And what if, and it's not legal really in Venezuela, kind of. It's like there's a lot of legal gray area, and they kind of want you to use the Petro and things like that. And it's a little bit of a different situation. But you kind of wonder what would happen if El Salvador, instead of doing a mandate, if they just said, this is legal, you can use it for this. In fact, if you do this, you get a certain tax break or something like that. If they did not actually spend any money on Bitcoin, if they just said it's legal and you're incentivized to use it, I wonder how much adoption, because what happens when the USD dries up from, or for the money, the withdrawals from Chivo dry up, right? How much usage is going to be left? Is it going to be more than there is, for example, in Venezuela, where they had no giant airdrop on this situation? And so you wonder, what if they still had that 300 million to spend on schools or whatever else, or just give tax refunds to people, or however, what other things they could do? What if they still had that and they just let crypto take its course and let people see the opportunity? I'm going to run down there and build a business. I'm going to go down there and get a point of sale system up and running. I'm going to use an existing one, like I'm going to expand Crypto Buyer to El Salvador, just install it on all these people. Say, oh, trust me, there's going to be some gringo coming wanting to spend this stuff, and
Mhm.
just without the 300 million in infrastructure, it kind of makes you wonder if even if they did the exact same thing, if they just didn't do it in a big spendy, splashy, corrupt government way, maybe we'd have at least the same benefits with none of the cost.
Yeah, true. And not only that, but if 300 million was spent, you'd hope that the app would at least function.
Yeah,
So there's
it's a little sad.
there's that aspect of it too. But
Hmm.
for the way that I feel about this is, it's a calculated risk that they're taking. The risk
Hmm.
is we put in $300 million and have these mandates and do these things that will have some consequences in the short term, but in the long term, it will attract enough crypto influencers and crypto businesses that the amount of money that comes in, especially with the appreciation of crypto over time,
Hmm.
will far outweigh the $300 million.
Hmm.
But again, maybe it won't. But I think that was the mindset that they had going into this. That let's
Yeah.
get on this now while crypto is cheap. Just get it started. Start filling our wallets with Bitcoin, and it'll pay off in the future. So
So you think the legacy of El Salvador's Bitcoin experiment is going to be on the whole a net positive if you macro out for all of humanity?
I don't think that removing individuals' rights
Hmm.
is ever a net good when you zoom
Very
out.
fair. Yeah.
However, if we put that to the side, then I think that economically, it's likely to be a net positive. But that for me, this is a question of, do the ends justify the means? Is it okay to remove personal freedoms
Hmm.
if we have what we suspect is a better financial outcome? And that's for people to make their own decision on. I think you have a thought process to that is similar to mine, but
Hmm.
um, we'll see. We'll see. But economically, I
Yeah.
think it will likely be a net positive for the country.
Yeah. And possibly for the world too, because it shows an example. It accelerates the growth and adoption of cryptocurrencies, which I really think is a net positive to the world. And the more I learn about not just the money, like the basic money side of things, but the DeFi side of things, the NFT side of things, all that stuff coming out, the more I realize that this is kind of a next giant societal leap forward for the entire species. And so for this, I'm really grateful that it's moving forward. So let me just say, I'll be positive about it. I will say, I'll be positive about it for the world. I'll be sad for the people of El Salvador for it
Yeah,
because,
they get to be the sacrificial lambs.
yeah, because this makes my life better off, but it might be at the expense of other people's freedoms and maybe even short-term economic benefit, you know?
I completely agree, and I don't think there's a question about what you said as far as the impact of El Salvador
Mhm.
is absolutely significant, not on just crypto, but on
Mhm.
the the way that we understand money and transferring value across the world, where
Mhm.
it would have been crazy to expect let's say regular people to really embrace crypto, but nowadays with whole countries doing it, it's like, okay, I'll give you an example. I recently bought a pretty expensive piece of machinery. I'm opening a cafe in my hometown,
Oh, nice.
and the woman I bought it from wanted me to pay her, and paying her in USD for this thing, it's $8,000. It's a mess to get the money to her.
Mhm.
It's an absolute mess. And it's like, just take crypto, problem
Mhm.
solved, no issue, easy. And the more places like El Salvador that are accepting it, the more regular people are going to say, oh, I better get on that bandwagon too. So it makes my
Yeah.
life easy, like you said.
Yeah. Well, I do think that, as I said, like if I were to visit El Salvador, I am relatively crypto savvy. I am relatively like lightning savvy.
Hmm.
I mean, I wouldn't say savvy, but competent, base competency maybe. And I could probably figure things out, and it'd make my life a lot better than if I was going to say Honduras, and they don't have
Mm.
anything, and I have to be like, well, do I have to like buy some big stack of like USD that I'm hiding in my coat pocket for the trip over, and then I got to go find how to turn them into pesos or whatever they got there, and like
Right.
it would suck for me more. And like El Salvador, I'm just like I just show up with my phone and I can figure
Yeah.
things out, and for me it makes things a lot better, and that's great. And just I don't know. Well, as always, everything's a gray area. There's no such thing as like a you know.
It is. I would say a lot of people who have kind of followed me, there's this impression that I'm anti uh, Bitcoin in El Salvador, and
Mm-hmm.
um, I think that's probably a fair characterization of how most people perceive me,
Mm-hmm.
based on what I've seen on Twitter. But the truth is, you know, there is so much gray area here,
Mm-hmm.
and it needs to be talked about. It needs to be discussed. And there's so much uh, optimism for Bitcoin, and which is well placed, that will overlook the short term um, sacrifices that are being made. And the question is, are those sacrifices worth the outcome? As far as removing personal freedoms, as far as sacking hundreds of millions of dollars that could go to hospitals during a pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
arresting a dissident, a Bitcoin dissident. Mario Gomez was arrested without a warrant for
Mm-hmm.
criticizing Bitcoin, was not charged. Um, and these are all the things that are happening so that you can go to El Salvador and spend your lightning on a Starbucks coffee. So it's sort of like the Starbucks coffee is cool. Don't get me wrong, and I like that.
Mm-hmm.
But let's not close our eyes to what the cost is for that.
Yeah, that's probably a good place to wrap this thing up. Where
Mhm.
do you want people to go to find out about you and your work or something you're passionate about?
So you're welcome to follow me on Twitter, just my name, MarcFalzon. You're also welcome to follow me on YouTube, which is also just my name, MarcFalzon. And I also have a full length 2 hour documentary on my experience in El Salvador and Bitcoin there specifically that will be released probably by the time this interview is up.
Nice. Yeah, well, so that'll probably be around Tuesday or so. So yeah, by then. Uh, so where do we find that thing?
Just on my YouTube channel, free for everyone to watch.
Nice. So yeah, it'll be right around the same time. So that means no one's gonna watch this one because they're gonna be watching the better thing. But hey, might as well watch both. So yeah, well, thanks everyone for
Absolutely.
watching. Yeah, and thanks for being on, Mark. And I'm sure we'll chat again in the future.
Absolutely. Good talking with you.
All right, thanks.